Rosa had been waking up at 3:30 in the morning for 15 years. Every single day, Monday through Saturday, her alarm would buzz in the tiny apartment above the fish market. She would roll out of bed, splash cold water on her face, and pull on the same worn clothes she'd been wearing for years. By 4 o'clock, she was downstairs in the market, switching on the lights and getting ready for another day. The smell of fish was so much a part of her life that she didn't even notice it anymore. But everyone else did. The Barcelona fish market was one of the busiest places in the city. Tourists came from all over the world to see the colorful displays of fresh seafood, but they rarely looked at the people behind the counters. To them, Rosa was just another vendor, someone who sold fish and nothing more. Rosa's hands moved quickly as she arranged the day's catch. Shiny sardines went in neat rows on the ice. Big sea bass lay with their mouths open, looking almost alive. Red prawns were piled high like tiny treasures. She knew exactly how to make everything look perfect, even though her own life felt far from it. The other vendors had been working there for years too. There was Antonio, who sold vegetables and always had dirt under his fingernails. There was Luis, who ran the cheese stall and liked to tell loud jokes. And there was Carmen, who sold flowers and somehow always looked fresh and clean despite working in the market all day. They all knew each other, but Rosa kept to herself. She would nod good morning and say please and thank you. But that was about it. The others had started calling her the quiet fish lady. Not in a mean way, but not in a particularly friendly way either. What none of them knew was that Rosa had a secret. Every evening, after she cleaned her stall and counted the day's money, Rosa would climb the narrow stairs to her small apartment. She would wash her hands 3 times, trying to get the smell of fish off her fingers. Then she would walk to the corner of her living room, where an old piano sat covered with a white sheet. The piano had been her grandmother's. Rosa's grandmother had been a music teacher, and she had taught Rosa to play when she was just a little girl. Rosa could still remember sitting on her grandmother's lap, learning where to put her fingers on the keys. But that was a long time ago. Rosa's grandmother had died when Rosa was 16, and life had gotten hard after that. Her family needed money, so Rosa had started working at the fish market. At first, she thought it would just be for a few months, maybe a year, but months turned into years, and years turned into decades. The piano had been silent for so long that dust had settled on the keys underneath the sheet. Sometimes, late at night, Rosa would lift the sheet and just look at the keys. She would remember the songs her grandmother had taught her. She could still hear the melodies in her head, but she was too afraid to play them. What if she had forgotten how? What if her fingers didn't work the same way anymore? What if the neighbors complained about the noise? So the piano stayed covered and Rosa stayed quiet. During the busy morning hours, the market was full of noise and activity. Customers would come early to get the best fish. They would poke and prod at the seafood, asking if it was fresh, as if Rosa would try to sell them anything that wasn't. Most customers barely looked at her when they talked. They would point at what they wanted and hand over their money without making eye contact. Rosa had gotten used to being invisible, but sometimes she would catch pieces of conversations that hurt. People would whisper to each other about the smell, about how the fish vendors must go home stinking every day, about how they could never live like that. Rosa would pretend not to hear, but the words stuck with her. She would go home and shower for longer than usual, scrubbing her skin until it was red. She would wash her clothes twice, sometimes 3 times, but the smell seemed to follow her everywhere. The worst part was that she had started to believe what people said about her. Maybe she was just a fish vendor. Maybe that was all she would ever be. Maybe she didn't deserve anything more. One day, a young girl came to the market with her mother. The girl couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with big, curious eyes that looked at everything. While her mother was choosing fish, the girl stared at Rosa. "Do you like working here?" the girl asked suddenly. Rosa was so surprised that someone had actually asked her a question about herself that she didn't know what to say at first. It's a job," Rosa finally answered. "But do you like it?" the girl pressed. Rosa looked down at her hands, stained with fish scales and salt water. "I don't know if like is the right word. What would you rather do?" the girl asked. The question hit Rosa like a wave. When was the last time anyone had asked her what she wanted? When was the last time she had even asked herself? Rosa started, then stopped. She couldn't tell this little girl about the piano. She couldn't admit that she had dreams that felt impossible. "Come on, let's go," the girl's mother said, pulling her daughter away. But the girl kept looking back at Rosa as they left. That night, Rosa climbed the stairs to her apartment feeling heavier than usual. The girl's question kept echoing in her head. What would you rather do? She made herself a simple dinner and sat at her small table eating in silence. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the city, cars driving by, people talking and laughing, music playing from someone's radio. After dinner, Rosa found herself standing in front of the covered piano. She reached out and touched the white sheet, feeling the outline of the keys underneath. Slowly, carefully, she lifted one corner of the sheet, just enough to see a few keys. They were yellowed with age and covered in dust, but they were still there, waiting. Rosa pulled her hand back and let the sheet fall. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. But the question stayed with her. What would you rather do? The next morning was the same as always. Rosa woke up before dawn, went downstairs and set up her stall. The fish came in on the truck, cold and fresh from the Mediterranean. She arranged them on ice, making sure everything looked perfect. But something felt different. Maybe it was the little girl's question, or maybe it was just that Rosa was getting tired of the same routine day after day. She found herself looking at the other vendors and wondering about their lives. Did Antonio dream of something other than vegetables? Did Luis have secret wishes beyond selling cheese? Did Carmen ever want to do something completely different? Rosa realized she had never really talked to any of them, not really. She had been so focused on just getting through each day that she had forgotten how to connect with people. Around noon, when the morning rush had died down, Carmen came over to Rosa's stall. She was holding a small bouquet of flowers, the kind she usually sold to tourists. "These are starting to wilt," Carmen said. "I thought maybe you'd like them for your apartment." Rosa was so surprised that she almost didn't take the flowers. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You know," Carmen said, leaning against Rosa's counter, "I've been working here for 10 years and I don't think we've ever really talked." Rosa didn't know what to say to that. It was true, but admitting it felt embarrassing. "What do you do when you're not here?" Carmen asked. The question was innocent enough, but it made Rosa's heart race. What did she do? She went home. She ate. Dinner alone, she looked at a covered piano and she went to bed. That was her life. "Not much," Rosa said finally. Carmen seemed to sense that Rosa didn't want to talk about it. "Well, if you ever want to grab coffee sometime, let me know. There's a nice cafe just down the street." After Carmen left, Rosa looked down at the flowers in her hands. They were simple daisies, white with yellow centers, but they were the first gift anyone had given her in years. That evening, Rosa put the flowers in a glass of water and placed them on her windowsill. They brightened up the whole apartment. As she looked at them, she thought about Carmen's invitation. When was the last time she had gone anywhere besides work and home? Rosa realized that she had built walls around herself so high that she couldn't see over them anymore. She had convinced herself that she was protecting herself from being hurt, but really she was just keeping herself from living. The piano sat in the corner, still covered, still waiting. But for the first time in years, Rosa wondered what would happen if she played it again. Would the music still be there, waiting for her like the flowers had been waiting for Carmen to give them away? Rosa didn't uncover the piano that night, but she thought about it. And sometimes thinking about something is the first step toward doing it. The next day, Rosa woke up a few minutes earlier than usual. She spent a little extra time getting ready, even though she was just going to work at the fish market. She wasn't sure why, but something felt different. Maybe it was the flowers on her windowsill. Maybe it was Carmen's kindness. Or maybe it was just time for something to change. As Rosa walked downstairs to start another day, she found herself humming quietly. She didn't even realize she was doing it at first. It was an old song her grandmother had taught her, something she hadn't thought about in years. The melody followed her as she turned on the lights and began arranging the fish. For the first time in a long time, Rosa's work felt a little bit like a dance. She didn't know it yet, but change was coming. Sometimes it starts with small things. A little girl's question, a gift of flowers, a song remembered, and sometimes change starts with the courage to lift a white sheet and remember who you are. 3 weeks after Carmen had given her the flowers, Rosa noticed a bright yellow poster hanging near the market entrance. It was announcing the annual neighborhood festival, something she had heard about but never paid much attention to. This year was different, though. As Rosa read the poster more carefully, one section caught her eye. There was going to be a talent show at the community center. Local business owners and workers were invited to perform anything they wanted. Singing, dancing, comedy, or music. Rosa stared at the word music for a long time. Her heart started beating faster, and she looked around to make sure no one was watching her read the poster with such interest. The deadline to sign up was in 2 weeks. The performance would be the following Saturday night. Rosa couldn't stop thinking about it as she went back to her stall and started arranging the morning's fish delivery. What if she signed up? What if she actually played piano in front of people? The thought was both exciting and terrifying. For the next few days, Rosa couldn't get the idea out of her head. Every time she looked at the poster, she imagined herself sitting at a piano, playing one of the beautiful songs her grandmother had taught her. But then she would remember where she was, who she was, and the dream would fade. Carmen noticed that Rosa seemed distracted. "Everything okay?" she asked one afternoon. Rosa hesitated. She wanted to tell someone about the crazy idea bouncing around in her head, but she was afraid Carmen would laugh. "Have you seen the poster about the talent show?" Rosa asked instead. "Oh, yes." Carmen's eyes lit up. "I'm thinking about doing a flower arranging demonstration. What about you? Are you going to participate?" Rosa felt her cheeks get hot. I was thinking about it. Maybe. That's wonderful. What would you do? This was the moment. Rosa could either tell the truth or make up something safe. She took a deep breath. "Piano," she said quietly. "I used to play piano." Carmen's eyebrows went up in surprise. "Really? I had no idea. That's amazing, Rosa. You should definitely sign up." The encouragement felt good, but Rosa still wasn't sure. "I haven't played in years. I might be terrible now." "Only one way to find out," Carmen said with a smile. That evening, Rosa went home and stood in front of the covered piano for longer than usual. Finally, she reached out and pulled the white sheet completely off. The piano looked smaller than she remembered, and older. The wood was scratched in places, and some of the keys were more yellow than others, but it was still beautiful to her. Rosa sat down on the bench and placed her fingers on the keys. They felt cold and unfamiliar. She pressed down on middle C, and the sound filled her small apartment. It was slightly out of tune, but it was still music. Slowly, carefully, Rosa began to play a simple scale. Her fingers felt stiff at first, but muscle memory is a powerful thing. Soon, the movement started to feel more natural. She played a few simple songs that night, nothing complicated, but it felt like coming home after a very long trip. The next morning, Rosa made a decision. During her lunch break, she walked to the community center and found the sign-up sheet for the talent show. Her hand shook a little as she wrote her name and piano performance next to it. As soon as she had signed up, Rosa felt a mix of excitement and panic. What had she done? She hadn't performed for anyone since she was a teenager. What if she made a fool of herself? But it was too late to back out now. Her name was on the list. Word traveled fast in the small market community. By the next day, somehow everyone knew that Rosa had signed up for the talent show. Antonio was the first to mention it. "So I heard you're going to play piano at the festival," he said while Rosa was buying vegetables for her lunch. "Yes," Rosa said simply, not sure how he had found out. "Didn't know you played music," Antonio said, looking skeptical. "That's interesting." The way he said interesting made Rosa feel uncomfortable, but she tried to ignore it. Luis was next. When Rosa walked past his cheese stall, he called out to her, "Hey, Rosa, Playing piano at the talent show, huh? That should be something. Again, there was something in his tone that didn't feel quite right, but Rosa told herself she was being too sensitive. It was Diego from the meat stall who made the first openly mean comment. Rosa was walking by when she heard him talking to a customer. Can you believe it? The fish lady thinks she's some kind of musician now. I mean, those hands that handle fish all day touching piano keys. I hope they clean the piano after she's done. The customer laughed, and Rosa felt her face burn with embarrassment. She hurried past, pretending she hadn't heard. But the comments didn't stop there. Over the next few days, Rosa began to notice more and more whispered conversations that seemed to be about her. People would stop talking when she got close, or they would look at her and then quickly look away. The worst part was that she started to doubt herself. Maybe Diego was right. Maybe her hands were too rough, too stained with fish scales to play beautiful music. Maybe she was fooling herself. 1 week before the performance, Rosa overheard a conversation that almost made her quit. She was cleaning her stall at the end of the day when she heard voices from the next aisle over. She recognized them as some of the regular customers, women who came to the market several times a week. Did you hear about the talent show next Saturday? One of them was saying. Yes, my neighbor mentioned it. Might be fun to watch. Well, I heard that the fish seller is going to play piano, can you imagine? The women started laughing. Those poor piano keys, they'll probably smell like fish for weeks after she touches them. And her clothes. Has she ever worn anything that doesn't smell like the ocean? I feel bad for whoever has to perform after her. The whole place will probably reek. Rosa felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. She stayed very still, hoping they would leave soon. Maybe we should sit in the back row, one of the women said. You know, just in case. They laughed again and walked away, leaving Rosa standing alone behind her stall, feeling smaller than she had ever felt in her life. That night, Rosa sat at her piano but couldn't bring herself to play. The women's words kept echoing in her head. She looked down at her hands, really looked at them. They were rough from years of work, with permanent stains under her fingernails. The smell of fish did seem to cling to them, no matter how much she washed. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she was crazy to think she could perform in front of people. Maybe she should just stick to what she knew. But then Rosa remembered her grandmother's voice, something she had said years ago. Music isn't about having perfect hands, Mika. It's about having something to say. Rosa's grandmother had worked hard too, cleaning houses to support her family. Her hands had been rough and calloused, but when she played piano, magic happened. The next few days were difficult. More people seemed to be talking about Rosa's upcoming performance, and not in a good way. She heard snippets of conversations about whether the community center should provide air fresheners, or whether Rosa should perform first so her smell wouldn't ruin the other acts. Rosa started eating lunch alone in the back room of her stall instead of sitting outside where people could see her. She avoided making eye contact with customers. She even considered calling in sick on the day of the performance. Carmen tried to be supportive. Don't listen to them, she said. They're just jealous that you have the courage to try something new. But Rosa wasn't sure it was courage anymore. Maybe it was just stubbornness or foolishness. The day before the performance, Rosa made one last trip to the community center to see the piano she would be playing. It was an old upright, similar to her grandmother's but in better condition. As she sat on the bench and played a few notes, she tried to imagine the room filled with people. Would they really be holding their noses? Would they be whispering about her smell the whole time? Would anyone actually listen to the music? Excuse me, are you Rosa from the fish market? Rosa turned around to see a woman in her 50s standing behind her. Rosa didn't recognize her, but the woman was looking at her with a kind expression. Yes, Rosa said cautiously. I'm Anna. I help organize the talent show. I just wanted to say how excited we are to have you perform tomorrow night. It's been years since we've had a piano performance. Rosa felt a little bit of her confidence return. Thank you, I hope people enjoy it. I'm sure they will, Anna said. Music has a way of bringing people together, don't you think? That night, Rosa practiced one more time. She had chosen 3 pieces to play, A gentle song by Chopin that her grandmother had loved, a beautiful melody by Debussy that sounded like moonlight, and a simple but moving piece by a Spanish composer. As she played, Rosa tried to focus on the music instead of her fears. She thought about her grandmother, who had taught her that every person has something beautiful inside them, even if the world can't always see it. Tomorrow night, Rosa would find out if her grandmother was right. The morning of the performance, Rosa woke up with butterflies in her stomach. She went through her usual routine at the market, but everything felt different. People kept looking at her, some with curiosity, others with barely hidden amusement. "Big night tonight, huh?" Diego called out as Rosa walked past his stall. "Yes," Rosa said simply. "Hope you don't make the whole place smell like fish." Diego laughed at his own joke. Rosa kept walking. She had decided that tonight, no matter what anyone. Rosa closed her fish stall early that Saturday evening. Her hands were shaking as she pulled down the metal shutters and locked up for the night. In 3 hours, she would be sitting at a piano in front of a room full of people. She climbed the stairs to her apartment slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. Part of her still couldn't believe she was going through with this. Part of her wanted to call the community center and say she was sick. But Rosa had made a promise to herself, and she was going to keep it. She took a long shower, scrubbing her hands and arms until her skin was red. She washed her hair twice and used the special soap she had bought just for tonight. When she got out, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was pale, and her eyes looked scared. But there was something else there too. Something that looked almost like hope. Rosa had only one nice dress, a simple black one that she had bought for her cousin's wedding 5 years ago. It still fit, though it was a little loose now. She had lost weight over the years from working so hard and eating so little. She stood in front of her small mirror and tried to do something with her hair. It was gray now, more gray than brown, and she usually just pulled it back in a ponytail for work. Tonight she tried to make it look neater, more special. Rosa looked at her hands one more time. She had scrubbed them and put on hand cream, but they still looked like the hands of someone who worked with fish. The skin was rough and there were small scars from years of handling sharp knives and fish bones. For a moment she almost lost her nerve. How could these hands create beautiful music? How could someone like her perform in front of all those people? But then Rosa remembered something her grandmother used to say. Hands that work are hands that can create miracles. At 7:30, Rosa left her apartment and walked the 4 blocks to the community center. The evening air was cool and she could smell jasmine blooming in someone's garden. The smell was so different from the fish market, so clean and sweet. As she got closer to the community center, Rosa could see cars parked along the street and people walking toward the building. Her stomach felt like it was full of jumping fish. The community center was buzzing with activity. There was a small stage set up at one end of the main room with rows of folding chairs facing it. People were finding seats and chatting with their neighbors. Children were running around excited by the unusual evening event. Rosa found Anna, the woman who had spoken to her at the piano the day before. "Rosa, you made it," Anna said warmly. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Rosa admitted. "That's completely normal. Even professional musicians get nervous before performing. Come on, let me show you the backstage area." The backstage area was really just a small room behind the main hall, with a few chairs and a mirror. There were 5 other performers getting ready. Rosa recognized the baker from down the street, who was apparently going to sing. There was also a teenage boy with a guitar, an elderly man with a harmonica, and 2 women who looked like they might be doing some kind of dance. Rosa sat in the corner and tried to calm her breathing. She could hear the audience talking and laughing on the other side of the thin wall. How many people were out there? 50? 100? "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our annual neighborhood talent show." Anna's voice came through the speakers and the crowd quieted down. "We have some wonderful performances for you tonight. Our performers are all members of our community, and they've been brave enough to share their talents with us. Let's give them our support and encouragement." The audience clapped, and Rosa felt her heart racing even faster. The first performer was the baker, who sang an old Spanish folk song in a surprisingly beautiful voice. The audience loved it, clapping and cheering when he finished. Next was the teenage boy with the guitar. He played a popular song that had everyone clapping along. Then came the elderly man with the harmonica, who played several cheerful tunes that made people smile and tap their feet. The two women did a traditional folk dance, their colorful skirts spinning as they moved across the small stage. The audience was enjoying everything, laughing and applauding each act. Rosa was supposed to go last. As each performer finished, she felt more and more nervous. The other acts were so lively, so fun. What if her piano music was too serious? What if people were bored? And now, Anna's voice came through the speakers. Again, we have Rosa, who works at our local fish market. She's going to play piano for us tonight. Rosa heard some murmuring from the audience. She stood up on shaky legs and walked toward the stage entrance. As she stepped into the light, Rosa could see the audience for the first time. There were indeed about 100 people there, maybe more. She recognized many faces from the market and the neighborhood. But what she noticed most were the expressions on people's faces. Some looked curious, some looked skeptical, and some looked like they were trying not to laugh. Rosa saw Diego from the meat stall sitting in the third row. He was whispering something to the person next to him, and they both chuckled. She saw the women who had been talking about her smell sitting in the back row, just like they had planned. But Rosa also saw Carmen from the flower stall, sitting in the front row with an encouraging smile. She saw Anna standing at the side of the room, giving her a thumbs up. And in the middle section she saw the little girl who had asked her if she liked her job, sitting with her mother. Rosa walked to the piano bench and sat down. The piano was old but well-maintained, with keys that felt smooth under her fingers. She adjusted the bench height just like she had practiced. As she settled herself, Rosa could hear the whispers starting. Is she really going to play that piano with those hands? I hope she washed them first. This should be interesting. Someone in the back made an exaggerated gesture of covering their nose, and several people around them laughed quietly. Rosa felt her cheeks burning. For a moment, she considered standing up and walking off the stage. She could say she felt sick, or that she had changed her mind. No one would blame her. But then Rosa looked down at her hands, positioned over the keys. These were the hands that had worked every day for 15 years to support herself. These were the hands that had learned to create beauty when she was just a child. These were the hands her grandmother had taught to find magic in music. Rosa took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room. The whispers stopped. Rosa had chosen this piece because it was one of her grandmother's favorites, and because it told a story without words. It started gently, like a lullaby, then grew more complex and emotional. As Rosa played, something magical happened. The audience, which had been restless and chatty just moments before, became completely still. The music seemed to wrap around the room like a soft blanket, touching something deep inside each person listening. Rosa's hands moved across the keys with a grace that surprised even her. Yes, they were rough and scarred from years of work. Yes, they carried the permanent marks of her life at the fish market. But they also carried 15 years of suppressed music, waiting for this moment. The melody flowed from her fingers like water, like poetry, like a prayer she had been holding inside for too long. Rosa closed her eyes and let the music take over. She forgot about the audience, forgot about their whispers and jokes. She forgot about everything except the conversation between her hands and the piano. When the first piece ended, there was a moment of complete silence. Rosa opened her eyes and saw faces she didn't recognize. The skeptical expressions had been replaced by looks of wonder, surprise, and something that might have been respect. Then slowly the applause began. It started with just a few people, then spread through the room until everyone was clapping. But it wasn't the polite, obligatory clapping that Rosa had heard for the other performers. This was different. This was appreciation, maybe even amazement. Rosa felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had done it. She had actually done it. But she wasn't finished yet. Without speaking, Rosa transitioned into her second piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune. This was a more challenging piece, requiring delicate touch and precise timing. Rosa had worried that her fingers might not remember the complicated passages, but they seemed to have minds of their own tonight. The music painted pictures in the air. It sounded like moonlight on water, like gentle waves lapping at a shore, like dreams made audible. Rosa lost herself completely in the performance, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm, her face peaceful and concentrated. In the audience, people sat transfixed. Diego, who had made the cruel joke about Rosa's hands, found himself leaning forward, his mouth slightly open. The women in the back row had forgotten all about their concerns about smell. They were listening to something beautiful, something they hadn't expected. Carmen had tears in her eyes. She had known Rosa was special, but she had never imagined this. Ana was recording the performance on her phone, already thinking about how to convince Rosa to perform again next year. But perhaps the most moved person in the audience was the little girl who had asked Rosa about her dreams. She was watching, with wide eyes, understanding somehow that she was witnessing something important. Her mother held her hand and whispered, "This is why we should never judge people by what we see on the outside." The applause seemed to go on forever. Rosa stood beside the piano, still hardly believing what had just happened. Her hands were trembling, but not from nerves anymore. They were trembling from the energy of the music that had just flowed through them. As the clapping finally began to die down, Rosa started to walk toward the side of the stage. But before she could leave, Ana appeared with a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ana said, her voice full of emotion, "I think we can all agree that Rosa has given us something truly special tonight." The audience burst into applause again. Rosa felt her cheeks getting warm, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. It was from something she had never felt before, the warmth of being truly seen and appreciated. "Rosa," Ana continued, "would you mind telling us a little bit about your music? How long have you been playing?" Rosa had not expected to speak. She looked out at the 100 faces staring back at her, all waiting to hear her voice. These were the same people who had treated her as invisible for years, and now they wanted to know about her life. Ana handed her the microphone. Rosa's hands were still shaking as she took it. Rosa began, then stopped. Her voice sounded strange to her through the speakers. "My grandmother taught me to play when I was little. She was a music teacher." Someone in the audience called out, "How long has it been since you performed?" Rosa looked in the direction of the voice. It was an older man she didn't recognize. "This was my first time," Rosa said quietly. "I mean, my first time playing for other people since I was a teenager." A murmur went through the crowd. People were clearly surprised. "So you haven't been taking lessons or practicing with a teacher?" Ana asked. "No," Rosa said. I practice at home sometimes, at night after work." "After work at the fish market," Ana clarified. "Yes." Rosa saw Diego in the third row. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. It wasn't mockery or dismissal. It looked almost like respect. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Rosa recognized her as someone who bought fish from her stall regularly, though they had never really talked. "Can I ask you something?" the woman said. "I've been coming to your stall for 3 years and I had no idea you were so talented. Why didn't you ever mention that you played piano?" The question caught Rosa off guard. How could she explain that she had learned to make herself small, to hide the parts of herself that didn't fit into other people's expectations? I guess I didn't think anyone would be interested," Rosa said finally. "Are you kidding?" another voice called out. "That was incredible." Rosa looked around the room and saw something that amazed her. People were actually looking at her, really looking at her, as if they were seeing her for the first time. And maybe they were. An elderly woman in the back stood up. Rosa recognized her as Señora Martinez, who lived above the bakery. "I want to apologize," Señora Martinez said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I've walked past your stall probably 1,000 times, and I never bothered to get to know you. That was my mistake." Several people nodded in agreement. Rosa felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "The music you just played," Senora Martinez continued. It reminded me of my mother. She used to play piano too when I was little. I haven't thought about that in years. Other people began to speak up. The way you played that Chopin piece, said a middle-aged man. It was like you were telling a story without words. I got goosebumps. During the Debussy, added a young woman. It was so beautiful. Rosa had spent 15 years believing that she was just a fish vendor, that her music didn't matter anymore. But listening to these people talk about how her playing had affected them, she realized how wrong she had been. Music wasn't something that belonged only to concert halls and professional musicians. Music was something that connected people, that reminded them of their own stories and feelings. Carmen stood up from her seat in the front row. I've worked next to Rosa for years, she said, and I always knew there was something special about her. Now I understand what it was. Carmen looked directly at Rosa. You have a gift, and I'm so glad you decided to share it with us. A teenage boy in the audience raised his hand. Could you teach me to play like that? The question surprised Rosa so much that she almost dropped the microphone. I don't know if I'm qualified to teach, Rosa said. Are you serious? The boy responded. You just played 3 incredibly difficult pieces perfectly and you learned them on your own. I think you're more qualified than most teachers. Anna stepped closer to Rosa. You know, the community center has a piano that doesn't get used very much. Maybe you'd be interested in giving lessons here. Rosa felt like the world was spinning. An hour ago, she had been terrified to play in front of these people. Now they were asking her to teach? I would need to think about it, Rosa said carefully. Of course, Anna said. But I hope you'll consider it, and I hope you'll think about performing again next year. The idea of performing again next year seemed impossible to Rosa. This whole evening felt like a dream that she might wake up from at any moment. People started to get up from their seats, but instead of leaving, many of them began walking toward the stage. Rosa realized they were coming to talk to her. The first person to reach her was the little girl who had asked her about her dreams weeks ago at the fish market. That was the most beautiful music I've ever heard, the girl said seriously. Mom says you work with fish, but I think you should work with music. The girl's mother smiled apologetically. She's very direct, the mother said to Rosa. But she's right. You're incredibly talented. Rosa knelt down so she was eye level with the little girl. Thank you for asking me that question at the market, Rosa said. It made me think about what I really wanted to do. The girl beamed. I'm glad I helped. More people approached Rosa, each wanting to tell her how her music had made them feel. Some shared memories that her playing had brought back. Others simply wanted to say thank you. Diego, the meat vendor who had made the cruel joke about her hands, was one of the last to approach. Rosa braced herself, not sure what he might say. Rosa, Diego said, looking uncomfortable, I owe you an apology. I said some things about you that were, well, they were stupid and mean. Rosa didn't know how to respond. She had never heard Diego apologize for anything. The truth is, Diego continued, I was jealous. I've never been good at anything except cutting meat. Watching you play tonight, it made me realize that there's a whole world of beautiful things I don't understand. He paused, then added, Your hands, they're not just fish vendor hands. They're musician hands. They're hands that can create something amazing. Rosa felt tears coming to her eyes again. Thank you, Diego. That means a lot. As the crowd finally began to thin out, Rosa found herself standing alone on the stage with Anna and Carmen. How are you feeling? Carmen asked. Rosa looked around the community center, which was now mostly empty except for volunteers folding up chairs. A few hours ago, this room had been full of people who thought they knew exactly who she was. Now those same people had seen something completely different. I feel like I've been living someone else's life, Rosa said slowly. Like I've been pretending to be someone I'm not. Maybe, Anna said gently. You've been both people all along. The fish vendor and the musician. Maybe tonight was just the first time you let people see the whole picture. Rosa thought about that. It was true that she loved her work at the market, even with all its difficulties. She liked talking to customers. She took pride in selecting the best fish, and she enjoyed being part of the busy life of the neighborhood. But she also loved music. She always had. Tonight had reminded her that loving something didn't mean you had to choose between it and everything else. Rosa, Anna said, I meant what I said about teaching piano lessons here. The community center has been looking for new programs to offer. We could start small, maybe just a few students. Rosa looked at the piano where she had just performed. Could she really teach other people to play? Did she know enough? I would need to practice more myself, Rosa said. I'm pretty rusty on a lot of pieces. That's what makes you perfect, Anna said. You understand what it's like to start over, to rebuild something you thought you had lost. Carmen nodded in agreement. And you understand what it's like to have a dream that feels impossible. That's exactly what a lot of people need to hear. As Rosa finally left the community center that night, she felt like she was walking in a different world. The same streets, the same buildings, the same night air. But everything looked different when seen through the eyes of someone who had just discovered she was more than she thought she was. When Rosa got back to her apartment, she sat at her piano for a long time without playing anything. She just looked at the keys and thought about the evening. Her phone, which almost never rang, buzzed with a text message. It was from Carmen. I recorded part of your performance on my phone. Would you like me to send it to you? Rosa stared at the message. There was actual evidence that tonight had really happened. She wasn't dreaming. Yes, please, Rosa texted back. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed again with a video file. Rosa pressed play and heard her own hands creating the beautiful sounds she had made just a few hours ago. She watched herself playing. This woman in a simple black dress who... Rosa woke up the Monday morning after her performance feeling like she was living in someone else's life. For a moment, lying in bed, she wondered if the entire evening had been a dream. But then she saw her black dress hanging on the chair where she had carefully placed it the night before, and she knew it had all been real. As she got dressed for work, Rosa caught herself humming. It was the melody from the Chopin piece she had played, and it seemed to float out of her without any effort. She hadn't hummed while getting ready for work in, well, she couldn't remember how long. When Rosa arrived at the fish market that morning, she expected everything to be the same as always. But as soon as she started setting up her stall, she noticed that something had changed. Carmen waved to her from across the way with a huge smile. Good morning, superstar, she called out. Rosa felt her cheeks get warm, but it was a good kind of warmth. Antonio from the vegetable stall walked over to her. Rosa, he said, my wife was at your performance on Saturday night. She hasn't stopped talking about it. She says you play like an angel. Rosa didn't know what to say to that. Thank you, she managed. She wants to know if you give lessons, Antonio continued. My daughter is 8, and she's been asking for piano lessons for months. Before Rosa could answer, Luis from the cheese stall appeared. Rosa, I heard about Saturday night. Why didn't you ever tell us you were a musician? By 9 o'clock, Rosa had talked to more of her fellow vendors than she had in the previous 5 years combined. Everyone wanted to hear about her performance, and several people mentioned that they had friends or family members who were interested in piano lessons. But the biggest change came when her regular customers started arriving. Senora Garcia, who had been buying fish from Rosa for 3 years, approached the stall with a completely different attitude than usual. Good morning, Rosa, Senora Garcia said warmly. I was at your concert on Saturday. I had no idea I was buying fish from such a talented artist. Rosa was so surprised by being called an artist that she almost dropped the fish she was wrapping. My granddaughter is 10, Senora Garcia continued, and she's been taking piano lessons for a year. But her teacher is very strict and not very encouraging. Would you consider taking her as a student? Rosa felt overwhelmed. I've never taught anyone before. I don't even know if I'm good enough to teach. Are you kidding? Senora Garcia laughed. After what I heard on Saturday night, I think you could teach professional musicians. As the morning went on, more customers mentioned the performance. Some had been there, others had heard about it from friends. Word was spreading through the neighborhood faster than Rosa could have imagined. Around noon, Rosa was surprised to see Anna from the community center walking through the market. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," Anna said. "I wanted to talk to you about something." Anna looked excited. "I've had 12 phone calls since yesterday morning from people asking about piano lessons with you." 12. And that's just people. Who had my number? Rosa stared at her. 12 people want me to teach them piano? More than that, probably. I think there are a lot of people in this neighborhood who would love to learn music, but they've been intimidated by traditional music schools or expensive private teachers. Anna leaned against Rosa's counter. "You know what I think? I think you represent something that people can relate to. You're not some distant professional who's been playing since they were 3 years old. You're someone who works hard, who understands what it's like to have dreams that seem impossible." Rosa thought about that as she continued arranging fish on ice. Maybe Anna was right. Maybe her years away from piano hadn't been wasted time. Maybe they had taught her something that could help other people. "If I were to teach lessons," Rosa said carefully, "I would need to practice more myself. There are so many pieces I used to know that I've forgotten." "That's perfect," Anna said. "You could learn together with your students. Think about how encouraging that would be for someone who's just starting out, to see that even their teacher is still learning new things." That afternoon, Rosa found herself thinking about piano lessons while she worked. She imagined sitting at the community center piano with a nervous 8-year-old, showing her how to place her fingers on the keys. She imagined helping a teenager learn his first Chopin piece, or teaching an elderly person who had always wanted to play but never had the chance. The idea scared her, but it also excited her in a way she hadn't felt in years. That evening, Rosa practiced for 2 hours. She worked on pieces she hadn't played in years, and she also looked through her grandmother's old music books for simple songs that would be good for beginners. As she played, Rosa realized something that surprised her. Teaching piano might actually help her become a better musician herself. Explaining music to other people would force her to understand it more deeply. The next morning, Rosa called Anna. "I want to try teaching lessons," Rosa said. "Just a few students at first to see how it goes." Anna's excitement was obvious even through the phone. "That's wonderful. When would you like to start?" "Maybe next week. I need a few more days to prepare." "Perfect. I'll call back the people who were interested and set up a schedule." After Rosa hung up the phone, she sat at her piano and realized that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even imagine. The first student was 8-year-old Isabella, Antonio's daughter. Rosa had been nervous all day before the lesson, worried that she wouldn't know how to explain things or that Isabella would be bored. But when Isabella sat down at the piano bench and placed her small hands on the keys with such excitement, Rosa felt all her nervousness disappear. "Music is like learning a new language," Rosa told Isabella. "At first, it might seem confusing, but soon you'll be able to say beautiful things with your fingers." Isabella was a natural. She listened carefully to everything Rosa said, and she practiced the simple exercises with determination. When she managed to play "Mary Had a Little Lamb" with both hands, her face lit up with such joy that Rosa felt tears in her eyes. "Miss Rosa," Isabella said at the end of the lesson, "do you think someday I could play like you did at the concert?" Rosa looked at this eager little girl and saw herself at that age, sitting with her grandmother and dreaming of making beautiful music. "If you practice and never give up on your dreams," Rosa said, "you might play even better than me." Rosa's second student was completely different. Mrs. Chen was 72 years old and had always wanted to learn piano, but never had the opportunity. "I know I'm starting very late," Mrs. Chen said during their first lesson. "My fingers are arthritic and probably too stiff." Rosa looked at Mrs. Chen's hands, which were lined and spotted with age, much like her own grandmother's hands had been. "Mrs. Chen," Rosa said gently, "I started playing again at 43 after not touching a piano for 20 years. It's never too late to make music." Mrs. Chen turned out to be one of Rosa's most dedicated students. She practiced every day and approached each lesson with the focus of someone who knew that time was precious. By the end of the first month, Rosa was teaching 6 students ranging in age from 8 to 75. Each lesson taught her something new about music and about teaching. She learned that everyone had their own way of understanding rhythm and melody. She learned that patience was the most important skill a teacher could have, and she learned that watching someone discover their own musical voice was almost as rewarding as finding her own. But Rosa didn't stop working at the fish market. She arranged her teaching schedule around her market hours, giving lessons in the evenings and on Sundays. Some people thought she was crazy to keep both jobs. "Why don't you just teach music full-time?" Carmen asked. "You could probably make more money and it would be easier on your back." Rosa had thought about that, but she realized she didn't want to give up the fish market entirely. It was part of who she was, part of her story. The work had taught her discipline and resilience, qualities that made her a better musician and teacher. "I like having both," Rosa told Carmen. "They balance each other out." And it was true. The physical work of the fish market kept her grounded, while the music lifted her spirit. Her hands moved from handling fish to creating melodies, and somehow both activities felt essential to who she was becoming. 6 months after her first performance, Rosa was invited to play at the community center's Christmas concert. This time, she wasn't nervous. She had become a regular part of the neighborhood's cultural life. She played 3 pieces that night, including a beautiful Christmas carol that her grandmother had taught her. But the most special moment came when Isabella, her first student, joined her on stage to play a simple duet they had been practicing together. As Rosa and Isabella played side by side, Rosa thought about how much had changed. She was no longer the invisible fish vendor who kept her dreams hidden under a white sheet. She was Rosa the musician, Rosa the teacher, Rosa the woman who had learned that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. After the concert, a young reporter from the neighborhood newsletter approached Rosa. "I'd like to write a story about you," the reporter said. "Your story is inspiring. You've shown people that extraordinary gifts can be found in ordinary places." Rosa agreed to the interview, and a few weeks later, the story was pub.